guest today. This is a bonus episode to the podcast, but it is still a podcast. So I want you guys to share and invite, share and invite. We got a topic that a lot of y'all gonna need to hear today. We have a guest that is poised to give us information on it and things that we need to do to kind of identify it and kind of see our way through it. So I'm excited. We've been talking about trauma bonds. So today, what I want you to do is give me about 30 seconds. I'm going to come back just to make sure that we're going to YouTube and Facebook the way we need to. I'll be right back. And on the other end of that, we're going to get the podcast started. So stay tuned.
Okay, everybody wants good love, that's true, I know. Derek Jones about to break it down with the relationship gumbo. Welcome to the podcast, ain't no doubt we all need this, ayy. Cause better relationships need better ingredients, ayy. So if you want better relations, it's about communication, finding love, staying together. We all wanna make it better, yeah. Derek Jones the host, your relationship coach. Thank you all for tuning in, relationship gumbo, ayy.
Hey, everybody. We are here on a Thursday. I know it's not Wednesday, it's Thursday, but guess what? The content is just as good. So we're going to get it in. Like I said, I have a special guest. We're talking about trauma bonds today. And if you don't know what that is, we're going to give you a little bit of, we're going to tell you what it is so you can identify it in yourself or people that you know. So we can kind of give things a name so we can know how to move forward. So if you haven't been here before, the way that this goes is it's also an audio podcast. So the audio will be taken from this and uploaded as a podcast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause for 3 seconds. We're going to start the podcast. And at the end of the podcast, I'm going to pause for another 3 seconds. So pretty easy. Make sure you share and invite with your friends and family, especially people that are, in relationships or dating and just trying to figure things out. All of the whole gambit. So we're going to bring my guest in. But first, we're going to introduce the podcast. So give me my 3 seconds. Welcome to the Relationship Gumbo Podcast. My name is Derek Jones, and I am your host. I'm a certified life and relationship coach, a strategist, an engineer, and a mental health advocate. And today we are talking about trauma bonding and trauma bonds. And I have a guest that's going to help me out today. She is a professional at this, but I'm going to let her introduce herself in about 2 seconds here. And I met her by way of a friend to the show, Spin City or Ursula, who has the Black Girls Getting Their Shift Together podcast. So make sure you follow her on all social media. So this next guest I watched her on Ursula's show, and I was like, wow, she really has a lot of pertinent information. I like how she delivers it because I'm all about people catching it. I don't want things to go over your head. I want you to get it. I want you to feel it, and I want you to heal from it. So without further ado, we're going to introduce my guest. So stand by. All right, Miss Sarita Ibrahim, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. It's been a long time coming. I remember before you introduce yourself, I remember one of the first times like a few times after you was on the other show, I was like, I need to steal you. And you said I'm stealable. so you remember that?
I do.
So I want you to introduce yourself, tell people who you are and what you do.
Well, hello. I had a wonderful introduction. I'm Sarita Abraham, and I am a therapist and coach. And I work with women who experience trauma, complex PTSD, sexual abuse, and especially those who have had trauma bonds. So we're going to get all into the details about what it looks like and how you can heal from it.
Cool. So the first thing I want to do, we're going to jump right into it. The first thing I want to do is just give people like a simplistic kind of view of what a trauma bond is or what trauma bonding is. I want you to kind of give them an idea of what it is so that we can kind of expound on it and give some examples.
Absolutely. A trauma bond is a relationship that is reflective of an attachment that is created by repeated physical and or emotional trauma with intermittent positive reinforcement. So basically what that means is you're in a relationship that's kind of shitty. Sometimes it's not, but then it gets more shitty. So that's what it looks like is it starts out great. It starts out looking and feeling like a healthy relationship, and then it takes a turn. And I can get into explaining why, but I want to make sure you don't have any questions.
Right. So the first thing I want to say about this is I think in my little short time on the planet, I've had many of these because in hindsight I can identify myself as at least understanding and knowing that I was someone who had trauma and kind of sought relationships based off of the trauma. And that's why I always say here about when people choose their mate, I say, are you choosing it or is your trauma choosing the mate? Because yeah, because my trauma chose a lot of mates for me, and I chose a lot of people who also had things going on with them, and we bonded on other things that had nothing to do with how we connected, like how we should be connecting in a relationship. So the first I guess question that I have for you, because I want this to kind of flow more conversation than interview, but I do have a question about what this looks like, or what, better yet, can you give me like an example of what it would look like for someone, like an example of how it would look like maybe from a person who maybe, I would say, I don't know what the word is, maybe seeking something based on the trauma? Like, what does that look like, whether it's a man or a woman or both?
Okay, first let me say, I think many of your listeners, they probably know what trauma is, right?
Right.
But just to kind of reiterate the point, trauma can look like verbal abuse, sexual abuse, emotional neglect, which is a really big one for people who've experienced trauma because it's invisible. The effects aren't exactly clear, and people aren't, they don't recognize how it links back to their childhood because most
Right.
of the trauma that we've experienced occurs in childhood, and then the people that we meet along the way, they exploit those vulnerabilities and those issues that we've had. So for I was going to say a woman, but any person, of course, can be in a
Right.
trauma bond. And a trauma bond can be any relationship. It could be a friendship, it could be a family member, it could be a parent trauma bond, and it can also be an intimate relationship. And so, what that can look like is there are stages to a
Mm-hmm.
trauma bond. And so, in the beginning, it can look like a fairy tale. And many of you and your listeners probably know the word love bombing. So it can look like a person who is your Prince Charming, or your damsel in distress, and they're giving you everything you need, all the missing needs, which is really code for all the things you didn't get in childhood. But we can go into that later. So they will give you what it is that you want because you've already given all the tips and the tools and the information away, most likely in the first 15 minutes that they need to
Right.
exploit it to manipulate you.
Right.
And so it feels good in the beginning, but over time, throughout the stages, the relationships dynamic change. And let's be clear, especially if we're talking about a narcissist, they need admiration and love and attention, and they need that support. And a codependent, which is Susie, you talk about,
Ah, yes.
Susie needs to be needed. Susie
Mm-hmm.
gets her affirmation and her self-worth and validation from other people. So it works out very well in terms of needs and patterns, but it's also toxic.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the even in the case of a narcissist or someone who may who may be exhibit some similar tendencies, they know how to identify people that kind of fit the narrative that they need to feed their whatever it is they're feeding.
They're master manipulators, so
Yeah.
they know how to choose their prey.
Yeah, yeah. And in one of the past shows I had, it was called something about, because the quote I always talk about is we always talking about people preying on us, but what makes you good prey? What about you makes them, what about you is appetizing to the predator? That's the part that most people don't look at. They always want to say, and that's the thing, like people who have, like, this is just you're the professional, but correct me if I'm wrong. The people who are out here with trauma, because they may not necessarily identify it in themselves, they point and say, this is why I'm like this, or this is why I'm dealing with this. And it just,
I It's so interesting that you say that because I'm the one who's always talking about the reason why. Like you always, you need to look at you. If shit ain't working, boo boo, you need to look in the mirror. That's the first place to start. But what I
Yeah.
can say about that is many people who've experienced trauma, you're absolutely right. They don't recognize it in themselves. They don't understand their own dysfunctional patterns. They are good people. I'm helpful. I'm loving. I'm a superwoman, right? I come to people's rescue. I'm a caretaker. That's what I
Right.
do. And they don't recognize how that is the pattern that the predator will prey upon. He's
Yeah.
going to prey upon your empathy. He's going to prey upon your tendency to be a caretaker, to be a rescuer, to give them all the love and admiration that they need.
Yeah. It's it all of this stuff that I'm talking about now is hindsight, like life experience hindsight, and I recognize it in myself, but I also recognize it in the people that I chose. Like several times when I was dealing with my own deficiencies and things that I needed, I sought people that I saw excessively needy people so that I would feel like they needed me. Like that was one of the things that I in how I sought out partners, because all of that extra attention that I got, of course, goes back to childhood, right? So like I had parents that loved me, but the affection was something that I didn't get from them. I sought it out from the people, but I wanted like enough for 3 people.
Exactly.
So it was like an overdose. And I felt in that moment, it felt good, but then all the other stuff that I needed fell flat because I wasn't paying attention to all of that stuff. That makes sense.
Of course it does. And what you just talked about is so not just important, but it's applicable to each and every one of us because the needs that we didn't get in childhood, and which is why I'm always talking about childhood, the needs that we didn't get, the ways that we feel that we weren't loved or supported by the people who were supposed to love us. If we're not willing to take a look at ourselves, we will continue to go out in the world to get a need met that actually is a need, not even for today. We just go on continuing as if another person can meet the need. The time is past.
Right.
There's no amount of unconditional love that a person can give you to make up for what you didn't get. You got
Yeah.
to be able to give it to yourself.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons
Your
why I chose to be a coach or to even delve into this whole thing about how we connect, because for everything that I went through, for all the stuff that I see my peers go through and everybody else, and I'm like, what if somebody told me that 10 years before? I want to catch those folks and try to. They don't all listen, but I want to try to catch them before they, cause that go through is some whew. It's a whole lot in to say, because what happens is you go, like when you go through the bonding, the trauma bonding, and maybe one day you decide, wait, this is dysfunctional. On the other side of it, you tend to morph into something else that you probably wasn't even before you entered into the relationship, and now you got to try to heal that.
That's that right there, baby. That right there is the absolute truth. So let me give you an example. And one of the things you always talk about Susie,
Uh-huh.
and Susie can be identified as codependent.
Yes.
So when we understand really what that looks like, and I wish somebody would have sat all the women down in my family and had us a chat about what it means to be codependent, and we never got that, so we just figured it out.
Yeah.
Hopefully, but it's about attachment. Because when we're talking about childhood, we're talking about how do we start off with our relationships? How do we learn to trust people? How do people mirror back us? Mirror back the reflection of who we authentically are. If that doesn't happen, attachment goes wrong. So let me give you the definition, and there's many definitions for codependency. So there's no one or right or wrong, because it's not in the DSM. So it's not an
Right.
actual diagnosis. But this definition by Pete Walker is codependency is a fear-based inability to express rights, needs, and boundaries. It is a disorder of assertiveness characterized by a dormant fight or flight response to being exploited, abused, or neglected. So basically, that means your trauma response is what we call the fawn, the Susie. I'm gonna just go along to get along. I'm gonna just do what
Hmm.
people need me to do in order to make things work. And I don't have the ability to fight or to flee when necessary. And so all my relationships will be reflective of my learned ability to do and be what other people need me to be.
Yeah, and now just hearing you say that, what's a gift and a curse of being a human is that we adapt to things. And we adapt to some good things and we adapt to some bad things. And even to me, and like I said, I don't have all of the pretty words, but if I deal like, and I always have to bring it back to me, when I dealt with the trauma of being hurt, relationship hurt, I didn't tackle the hurt. I just made the hurt a part of the dysfunctional behavior that I did after that. Like it became a part of who I was instead of me saying, this feels bad, I don't like this. It was like, okay, I'm just gonna own the trauma and I'm gonna seek people based on that. And I didn't really care. I didn't go back and say, this doesn't feel good, but I don't want to come out of this different than the person that, the character that I am. But it changed my whole behavior patterns and everything that I did because I didn't want to deal with it. So I sought other things to kind of cope with it and make it better.
That is a profound awareness on your part. And really, what you just described is is the essence of trauma. That's what trauma is. It is an emotional wound. And human beings, as you talked about, where we are adaptive. Let me explain it like this. Human beings have a biological drive to attach.
Hmm.
Our brains develop in a tribal culture. We're used to having people and connections. And when that gets broken, what will happen is we will sever the connection with our real self. So we
Yes.
have a need for attachment, excuse me, we have a drive for attachment, but we have a need for authenticity. But if attachment is threatened, we'll sever our connection with that authenticity. And we'll do it in ways that look like self protection, but it's really self sabotage because it only
Yeah.
gets worse until we address it.
Yeah, it's and that's that was one of the reasons why I came up with the whole Billy and Susie thing. And you know what? I hate the names, and like I always tell people, I
You
could have
came up
used
with them.
Keisha, but if I'd have used Keisha, somebody would have been banging on my in the comments talking about why she got to be named Keisha. So I went in and called them some names that wouldn't nobody fight me on. Um,
Neutral.
right, they're neutral, and um, Ursula says, "Tell her to explain. I don't understand that."
What is it that she
The
doesn't
last, the
understand?
last thing that you were talking about, authenticity and
Attachment?
detaching. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So human beings are driven to attach. First of all, it is attachment, and I know she knows a little bit about this.
Hmm.
It is attachment that makes the mother take care of the child and the child bond to the mother for its own survival. Like as children, as babies, we are defenseless, we are completely powerless. So attachment drives us basically in order to survive because we need each other. We need
Hmm.
human beings in order to survive. And that's a biological drive, which is why when we connect to people, our brain releases oxytocin and makes us feel good. When mothers breastfeed, it releases oxytocin. So the mother and the child feel good when they're holding. It's called the bonding molecule. So it's that drive. And if we don't have good attachment as children, we will seek replacements or substitutes throughout life to get that attachment that we were missing. But it's always just a substitute. It's always just fake love, the illusion of love. Like even with you were talking about, using women to make you feel good because of your hurt. There was no amount of substitution that these women could give
Nope.
you to heal
Nope.
your wounds.
Nope. And there,
And
she
so,
she says she
go
says
ahead.
tell her Patty wants to know.
Oh, and I get it. Patty needs to know because if when it comes to attachment, that drive for attachment is so important. that we will sever our authenticity, meaning what I really think, what I really feel, what I really need. And so I will sacrifice that in order to have a relationship. And as a child, if our parents aren't healthy, we're forced to do it for our survival.
Yeah, and you know, I feel like this happens more often than not, whether people would like to admit it or not. And that's why like what like this whole space of even just relationships and dating, and why so many people are just trying to figure out answers is, and most of the solution is, if you really just stuck to your authentic self, a lot of the stuff you wouldn't even deal with. But it's that gooey stuff in the middle that we want to attach to, the feeling, the all of this stuff that has nothing to do with what you know is right or wrong. So what you said it makes perfect sense to me.
The challenge is, though, depending on what a person experiences in childhood, they've never been connected to their authentic self for many of us. So the
Yes.
Susies in the world, and even the narcissist in the world, it's just the opposite of the same coin. It's just dealt with differently. One is through superiority and grandiosity, and the other is I make myself needed. I get
Yeah.
my self-worth and validation from other people. So that means if my drive is to get people to validate me, to affirm me, then I'm not in connection with my authentic self, because if I
That's
was,
very
I
true.
wouldn't need it.
That's
I would
very true.
set boundaries. I would say, I'm not putting up with this shit. Who you think you are? Can't do it, won't do it. Nope, that's not my place. I'm not Superwoman. No, but it doesn't go that way because you
Right.
don't know who you are.
Right. Yeah, that right there in itself is probably one of the most powerful things that it took me a while to learn, is that most of us have created a character based on what we think the validation, that you know, how we get our validation from people. Like we and what I also say is, if that's not you, then people are loving you based on something that's not even the real thing. And you sitting in it like, I got this person and I love them, but I'm like, who did they fall in love with?
That's exactly what I taught about in my class this last Tuesday. That's exactly it. Because what happens is, and the reason why we sever authenticity as children is because you don't get loved for being who you authentically are. You get love for being who you're told to be. You get love for being good, for staying in your place, for being silent. And so that becomes your learned behavior that gets executed automatically. That's how you begin to interact in the world. And I know for me, I did not know I was a fucking Susie. How could I be Susie? I'm smart, I'm ambitious, I'm making things happen, but I had some Susie qualities. And I didn't realize that I didn't know myself.
Right.
My boundaries was all over the place. I would set them once you got on my damn nerves. And there's a part of me that kicked in and say, no, we can't do this. But the fact that we had to get to that point let me know, well, once I got smarter, that I didn't set clear boundaries. I didn't know
Yeah.
how.
Yeah. It makes me think about some things that we talk about on the show a lot about men, and people kind of give me pushback on this, but I always talk about how specifically men are conditioned, and we get a pat on the back for being an asshole from like young, and we're conditioned to get that reward and that response based on moving in that direction, even when we know it's wrong, right? But a lot of us turn into these people who, even when we push against the programming, when we get into a distress moment, we revert right back to it, because that's where we know we get the feeling back again. And that's where a space where a lot of people who kind of like step out on their relationship and they go and do whatever, and it's like, and they're like, oh, they're this evil person, and I'm like, yeah, they're wrong, but this is where they know to go get comfort. Like, we've been trained this way, not to just go get one of y'all. How many numbers you got? How many you get? You got, where's the next one at? And you get all of this when you like 18. and it feel good because you're but it makes you into a person that's not even really like I mentioned to you off air. I was like, I went through a lot of years just repeating a cycle that made me feel like I was getting that pat on the back, and I'm like, that don't even have nothing to do with me. Like what I really want, and I had to, once I really stood firm on me, that's when I broke the programming. Because the programming says, if you in distress and if you hurt, don't heal, just go find another one real quick and then you'll feel better.
Listen, I had that programming too. Go get another one. Don't nothing make you feel better than a good O. You know what I'm saying? But seriously, what you just described is what I call the fucking patriarchy. We have a culture that, first of all, the culture lies so much that it has normalized lying. The culture will encourage you to lie. And for men, I'm glad that you do have this platform and you are talking about the things you're talking about, because I think the culture does a very terrible disservice to men, because it requires you to cut off aspects of your humanity. You're not allowed to be emotional. You're not allowed to show the vulnerability. You damn sure can't cry. Like over the age of 3,
nope.
You got to be a man, okay? And even your mamas, the women around you, will tell you to quit crying. You cry like a little girl. We can't have you around here acting like that. You a man. You better man up. So we're all complicit because we have these ideas about what it means to be masculine, which is based on a fucking lie. Because it's not sustainable, which is why men will turn to sex and multiple women and affairs and drugs. It's a human thing, but when we look at the health of men versus women, even they're married, it's bad. Like that's why y'all die faster than us.
Yeah. I always talk about like so here's I want to kind of bring it back to center after I do this because this, this is I'm all warm in the chest right now. So this is the thing, right? This is how toxic, and I know because you're the professional here, but just from a man who's been there, we're trained to hold that stuff in, and it can be traumatic to bring it back to center of this, but we're trained to hold all of this in from a kid, and then we get into these relationships. And we get in a relationship with a woman that's pissed off because we don't share. And it's like, you're not talking to me. And it's like, you can't say, well, that's how I was trained, right? And so you keep it in. And now you got a migraine and the stress and the blood pressure is up. Or you might have suicidal thoughts because it's pressure that you got to keep on every day. And you don't know what the outlet is. And going to the bar every week, it mutes it down, but you got to keep going. And you're doing all of this stuff to relieve the pressure when in reality, most of the time, the answer is just for you to kind of just share it and let it out. And we can't
and be authentic.
Yeah.
So let me, as you say, bring it back to center to relate this to trauma bonds.
Uh-huh.
So with what you just described as the challenges for men, we all should be like, oh, then it should not be crazy or unbelievable that so many men take on the role of being a narcissist. Because what you just described means that I have to become something false, something bigger than who I am, something stronger. I have to present to the world in a way that I am better than average. I'm not just the basic human being who has feelings. And so that grandiosity, that need for attention and approval will absolutely show up in their relationships. That need for affirmation, because who they are at their core is shameful. That's what the world tells you. It's shameful. And toxic masculinity is based in toxic shame. That's the thing that men, human beings, period. But a lot of men have to deal with because they're not living up to this role that they have been given without their consent.
Yeah, that's a whole show in itself. I could talk about that all day because I've seen almost every side of it, and I felt those ways, in the person I am today. It's not like what people have to realize is, and especially with trauma, like even when you find your way to be functional and kind of be your authentic self, it's still an internal battle that you have to fight on a regular basis. It doesn't
Okay,
go away.
say why. Why is it an internal battle? What's
Because
that about?
my for me, it's because, like, for an example, when I just talked about how we're conditioned and programmed, it's been so much a part of my life that now that I'm kind of on the other side of it, it's not like I forget the moods and how it felt. Like, it's always there, but I know how to manage it better now. But it didn't just disappear overnight. I've learned how to manage it better, and those instincts and those things that get triggered and made me want to it's still there. It's still in there. I'm just managing it better now. But it doesn't go like you have something that you have come out of after 35 years of your life of being one way. It don't just go away overnight.
So I think, as it relates to trauma bonds, I think that when we're talking about programming, it's so important to explain that it's conditioning. So conditioning becomes your subconscious learning. We
Right.
are conditioned to learn this way because it gives us a shortcut. It helps us to navigate the world easier. When you learn how to drive, you don't have to think about it. You learn how to ride a bike, it could be years. You could just get back on and do it. But these behaviors that we have also become subconscious programming. And so this is why it is so important to continue to have conversations like this, to be and to learn self-reflection, and to give yourself the space to be honest and authentic. Because if you can be honest about what you're feeling or what's coming up, or anybody, not just you, but
Right.
anyone can be honest about what comes up, then that thing doesn't have to control them. They don't have
Right.
to follow those guidelines. They can make a conscious decision about what they're going to do, how they're going to be, and how they're going to interact in relationships. The challenge,
Yeah.
though, for people in trauma bonds is that the abuser, the toxic person, is so ingrained as a part of their identity that it is extremely difficult to get them to see reality, because the
Yes.
reality of who they are for them is crushing, and the denial is so deep. And as a therapist, that's one of the more challenging personalities disorder to work with. And that shows how layered and ingrained some of these things are when it comes to our behaviors,
Yeah.
which is why you got to know that person ain't going to change. You got to leave. But go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So um I want to bring up one more last point because we're gonna have to
Okay.
wrap up soon, and
Okay.
I'm gonna preface that I'm gonna also say that we need to do like a part two, and it may be on a totally different topic, but I need you back here like soon, um, because I don't like to cap the time, but I gotta cap
Yeah.
the time because of the time. So I need you back. We're gonna do a part two. We're gonna work that out in the schedule sooner than later. We're gonna get that in. But I want to make this one point before we go. So someone who, let's say, I've been in a relationship. It's a legitimate trauma bond. I've been there for a while. I watched Sarita on the show one day, and I say, that's what I'm dealing with. What's one or two things that they can kind of do to kind of shift, or something that they can, like, I don't know. I'm trying to frame the question where it can be a little more simplistic. What's like one of the
Okay.
steps that they can take to try to not only just identify but start to detach from it, knowing that that's a part of who they are, and the bond is kind of like this. Like, how do you get someone to get back to to reality if they've been in it so long?
That's a very complex question, even though you want it to be simple. I get it. Because I know
I
we
was
work it
trying.
against
I was
time.
trying. I was
We
trying.
did a great job. I have to acknowledge you. You know, we always have to acknowledge a wonderful intent. So let me say this: is first of all, y'all need to be in my class.
Yes.
You need to be in my program because these are all the things that we talk about. Because basically, a person who finds themselves in a trauma bond is really at the core is they're having an identity crisis. I don't know who I am. I don't know how to communicate. I don't know how to ask for what I want. I don't know how to disconnect myself when I'm being abused or disregarded or devalued. And so you need to be in my program one. You need to seek some support too. If possible, go to therapy
Yes.
because depending on their specific situation, which could be very complicated, especially if there's abuse involved, there may need to be a plan put in place. And also, that person has to deal with their emotions because they may be addicted to that bond, to the intermittent reinforcement, to believing, the lies, and maybe in their own denial. So
Yeah.
they've got some things to deal with. And
Yep.
so seeking support, getting into a community, which is what I have, so you need to be calling me, but even if it's not me, a community of people that are non-judgmental, that are safe, and that will allow you to be who you are with all your challenges, your pain, your mistakes, because we're all human. And
Yep.
I definitely want people to understand that this does not mean anything about you, your character, or your value. It's about understanding who you are and how you got here.
Right. So I'm gonna say this one little comment, and then we're gonna tell people how they can find you in your class, and then with the caveat that you're gonna be back. So we're gonna keep her close, guys. Um, I always preach the fact that sometimes the solution is not in your own head, and you're gonna have to get help to try to manage those emotions and thoughts better, so that you can try to see the path to your way out of something, or how to manage yourself while you're in, because I'm not an advocate for you just detaching from somebody that you've been with, but I want you to understand where you're at and what it means. And a lot of times most humans don't have every answer, but there are people out here like Sarita who can help you put the puzzle pieces together so you don't keep spinning your wheels every day and kind of going in a downward spiral. So I'm a big advocate for therapy. I'm always the guy who passes the baton over, because it's some things that most things a coach isn't going to be able to get you to handle, especially with the emotions and the trauma and all of that. You need to really get some help. It's not this, as you see, Sarita's on here and she is giving it to you plain, and you really have to not be afraid to seek that help, because I always talk about projecting out in the future. The next year, do you want it to look like it is right now, or do you want to try to make some incremental things to try to get you where you need to get? So what I want you to do right now is I want you to tell people where they can go, what things you have to offer, and all of that kind of stuff, and how they can connect to you. Spin
Well,
City
I
just
know
put your website in the comments already.
Thank you. Well, you know what? My girl Earth is on it. So I know I know we got to consider time. So I'll just say you can absolutely go to my website. If you have any questions, you can always DM me, reach me by email. All of that stuff is on my Facebook page, The Whole Therapist. And I want to end with this: is that one thing that keeps trauma and abuse in place is shame. And shame will keep you invisible. It will keep you alienated from yourself and from those that love and support you. And so I invite you to look into yourself and be willing to allow yourself to be supported, because once you address the shame, once you can look at the shame, then you see shame for what it really is, which is nothing.
Yeah.
So I empower you to love on yourself, to be generous, to be supportive of yourself, and allow others to give you the same. Mwah!
Wow. That's a word right there. I'm gonna give you these couple comments. Ursula says, I'm in her class. It's amazing. Erica Warren from Facebook says, great information, great guest. Miss Lady T. Smith says she's the bomb.com. Absolutely love her. She has changed my life. So yeah, you definitely are
Amazing.
Going to be back. You're gonna be back.
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna be back too.
You're gonna be back. We're gonna put her contact information in the show notes of the podcast. Ursula had a typo. She corrected the typo so they can get the right website. So you got people that are really. I'm rooting for you. You got a lot of lives that you changed, and hopefully this conversation had some people get the little light bulb to go off and try to seek some help. So on that note, and always as usual, guys, go to relationshipgumbo.info and get all the goodies I got going on. You know, I'm always just follow me everywhere. You're gonna see all the stuff I got going on. Follow Sarita, www.thewholetherapist.com, and see all the goodies she got going on. And we're gonna be back. We just gotta, figure out the schedules, but I'm definitely gonna have her back because I don't like cutting off shows. I never do that, but I gotta do it today. So we're gonna do a part 2, but it may be another topic, but we definitely gonna have you back soon. So on that note, guys, the podcast portion, we're gonna end the podcast portion. Please be safe out there, guys. We appreciate you. We love you, and be well and be good and stay blessed. Have a great day.
I love you all, and thank you all for watching.
All right, podcast is over, guys. I gotta get out of here. I got things to do. Sarita got things to do. We all got things to do. Just make sure I'm gonna keep saying stay safe, because I see these videos and pictures of y'all on the timeline. Y'all need to stop it. Be safe. Be safe. We need you here. So we'll be talking to you guys later. Have an amazing day.
Okay, everybody wants good love, that's true, I know. Derrick Jones about to break it down with the relationship gumbo. Welcome to the podcast. Ain't no doubt we all need this, cause better relationships need better ingredients, so if you want better relations, it's about communication, finding love, staying together. We all wanna make it better, yeah. Derrick Jones, the host, your relationship coach. Thank you all for tuning in. Relationship gumbo.